Hey everyone, welcome to another typology interview. We have Catherine. How's it going?
Good. How are you?
Awesome. I'm glad we finally got to do this because you've been around for a while and, sort of missed each other on this interview thing,
Yeah. I think I missed a lot of interviews, to be honest. So don't take
right?
it personally.
No,
I'm
no,
really
no.
happy to be here as well.
Same thing. Don't take it personally. um, okay, let's start with your history and typology. That's how I always start. As is tradition.
Wow.
Do a regular
As is
person.
tradition, yes, as is tradition. Let's start with how I got started. Wow. I think it started with me trying to type everyone I knew. So it kind of started with the extroverted perspective, sleep last style, I guess. I think the first encounter I had with typology was probably in school. I did it's hard to explain what I did, but it's like a hybrid leadership program and creative innovation program. And in it, there's a lot of understanding of self baked into it. So a lot of different personality system kind of woven in to the curriculum to help people understand who they are. Not sure if the self-report aspect of it actually helped, but that's the
You're in
first
which country
encounter.
then? You're in Holland or Sweden or
I'm in. So the school was in Sweden. I lived
in Sweden?
in the Netherlands for like 4 years, and then now I'm
Okay.
back in
So like this
Sweden
is part of
again.
the Swedish school structure where they do personality stuff?
No, so it's actually I guess you'd call it like a vocational school in English. Not really sure if there's an equivalent in other countries, but essentially it's more like hands-on learning, SE style learning,
Okay.
which is in my case, I did like innovation strategy. There were various like creative pursuits um, included in the program. It was like a generalist program. Ultimately, the whole thing was like you find your NI and then you work on it, and then you get to work on various projects with various actual clients and actual companies that need your help. So that's apart from that, there was also then the leadership aspect of it and like understanding different leadership styles and how what your leadership style is. And then
Hmm.
in that bit, which was like a continuous overlapping thing, was the personality stuff. And of course, like everyone else, I typed as an ENFP.
So it was Myers-Briggs
um,
then.
it was Myers-Briggs, and it was also DISC, I think.
Right.
Like
Yep. Discount. The sales one.
yeah,
Yeah.
no,
Cool.
some kind of blue
And
something.
ENFP is so far off. I mean, it's
Not
pretty
so
good.
far off, I think. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think, and I remember reading the profiles, and I was like, this kind of sounds like me. I
Yep.
can kind of relate to it, and I definitely related to like the Saver FI part of
Right.
various like ENFP profiles that I found, and also the intuition part. But it
Yeah.
turns out it's just
Masculine NI is very present. Yeah.
it's very present. It's
Right.
very yeah. The only way I can describe masculine and I is like it's always there, but I'm not allowed to lean on it. I'm not allowed to do anything
Mhm.
with it, but I have it. Sometimes I don't, but I have in most situations I have it, but I'm obligated to prove that it's real. If that makes sense.
Right.
So that's how I started, and then I started like obsessing over various personality types. As I met various new people came into my life, and they kind of I was trying to improve my relationship to them, so I wanted to understand their type. So it was very much like other focused, I'd say, trying to figure out, especially my ex-boyfriend, like what is this person doing? Not in a negative way, but just it was like a character that I'd never really encountered before in my life.
Okay.
Just trying to understand what functions were at play. So that's my background in typology. Yeah.
And then so then how did you get over to OP then?
Wow. Yeah. I to be honest, I can't remember. I think I was on YouTube and I was clicking around as I do, consuming various things that are in my FI box.
Hmm.
And I guess typology happened to be one of them. And then I think perhaps the first video I saw of Dave's was like the ENFP, like the old school videos of him kind of going through the types. And it was the ENFP video. And then I listened to it and I was like, this is interesting because this guy has like a new and different perspective that has
Right.
more, ultimately more SE to it. which is perhaps what what attracted me to it. And then from there, I just signed up to the classes right away, and that was probably in October 2019.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Really cool. And so then when you went to get typed, did you put yourself as ENFP then?
I put myself as an ESTJ.
Wow.
Because and I've been processing why that is, right? Like obviously masculine intuition, I was like, I can't be SE and I axis. And I guess if you kind of mesh SE and I together, especially if it's masculine and I, you get some kind of any thing going on. And I can, who knows, right? But I guess
Right.
I think Dave and Sean are kind of saying the same thing. But so I perceived whenever I encountered NI and I was able to like double observe SE and NI, that was NE. So I was like, okay, so I'm definitely NE. So I thought for the longest time I was NETE. I never doubted the decider axis. But then I was like, oh, I'm struggling with people. And there's like a whole story to that, right? Like being sleep last, you're not super aware of your own patterns. And when you do hit sleep, at least in my case, I do have like tribe tidal waves. It's like, I'm doing this only for me, whatever. It's like a very extreme experience because it's also double masculine.
Yeah, it's interesting because I also remember, and since Rob's here, he pointed out to me as well that in my earlier interviews, I was confusing SE with NE a lot because they didn't have the whole channel change thing. And every time I saw a channel change, I was like, that seems like NE to me. But yeah, I guess, right. And so I guess if you're changing the channel a lot in the earlier days when they didn't have that lingo, it seemed like NE. Yeah.
It seemed like NE. Yeah.
Yeah.
And SE to me was just not something that I could identify with. And I think that's just the tricky part also about having a feminine lead function, right? Because
let's talk about that. Yeah.
I mean, it kind of means that you're doing something on autopilot that you're also not great at. It's like I'm gathering sensory, but what I'm logging is patterns. So
yeah,
it's just, it doesn't make any sense, to be honest.
So SE, a lot of what it's doing is comparing things on the sensory spectrum. This looks better than this. This is bigger than this. This is smaller than this. Like just being aware of that, right?
I think it's autopilot to a point where it's uninteresting to me. And I mean, like, that's also a part of SE, right? Is that you're like, you're bored by old. So there's a lot of SE I've seen and that I've logged that I'm like, this is known, you know?
Right.
So the SE that I'm looking for currently, and probably at the time when I was typing myself and getting typed, made me like, I was probably, you know, as little as that's probably true, I was on my way to NI, if that makes sense. Like if you were to talk to me when I was younger, when I was like a kid, for sure, SE it was everything that I knew, I would say. I was definitely an SE kid in the sense that I was like, oh God, I'll give an example because why not? Have this, I was like obsessed with botany as a kid, and I was this particular NI category of like Nordic orchids, which is also why I thought it was NT, because I was like, everyone just called me so nerdy. You know, I had all these various nerdy NI box interests that I would like engage in. But I would obsess about Nordic flowers to a point where it probably wasn't healthy. But I remember being out on like walks with various like famous botanists, and I was like, these are old people, and I can't believe that they can't tell the difference between this flower and that flower, and that they're debating whether it's this species or like this family or this family, you know, whatever was going on. So that definitely, like, I was hyper attuned to my sensory surroundings, and also have this one memory that I think I've like probably ranted about on Discord in the past, but like being in the car with my dad, and we were driving probably like 50 kilometers an hour, which is like what, 35 miles per hour or something. And I was like, stop the car. And I ran into the forest, and it was like 50 meters into the forest. And I was like, yeah, it was that flower that I thought it was. My dad just looked at me like, what the fuck is this girl doing? You know? So
Wow.
that's being hyper attuned to like your sensory surroundings in a
Yeah.
way that I noticed that none of my family members were. It stood out in comparison to
Noticing
what
everything.
others were
And so
noticing
and
everything.
it also seems like this one category, you were looking at the nuances, like the sensory nuances between the different orchids, which most people probably couldn't pick out the differences. But being SE, like that's what you were looking at, like those subtle little differences.
Yeah. And I'll still kind of experience that in my day to day, like when it comes to cooking and, you know, like going out, I don't know, ordering food. I'm like, this is objectively bad.
Right.
And it's just SE because there's also a sensory memory that I think is quite strong, baked
You're
into
comparing
SE.
it to all of the other sensory memories and
all the other sensory memories that I have.
Right.
So I'm able to say whether it's, you know, F good or bad. So that's that is kind of how I describe SF consume in a way, amongst
no,
other
that's
things.
good. The SF consume too, because like okay, so like your FI is very subjective, but it feels objective. It feels like right.
Of course it's not objective because I know that like I know other people would have a slightly different opinion, right? I think SEFE is probably more objective.
No, but like, so the SE is objective, more or less. Like it's still subjective. It's still your SE, but more or less all of the SEs somewhat align because you're trying. That's what SE is trying to do, is trying to align itself with reality or align itself with others or whatever. To be objective.
And the extroverted functions are going to be more objective, right? In however you want to put that.
So here's a question then about your consume. So if it's objectively bad, is your FI still have permission to like it?
Oh, this is a good question. This is where the sleep last kicks in. This is a really good question. Yes, I would say yes. That's the thing about FI. It's not scared. It doesn't mean that it always does it, right? But it's not scared to go against what is considered objectively valuable, right? So it acts like and I remember doing that a lot as a kid, especially. Now I'm less, you know, inclined to do so because I think it's ridiculous, to be honest.
Yeah, so that sounds that nuance is like FI against FE, but what about against SE? So like something that is like that tastes objectively bad, but you still like it because I don't know, someone made it, or I don't know, there's some kind of FI to it.
Yeah, I mean, sure. I'm trying to come up with an example, but I'm too feminine sensory to remember one. But I would say yes. Generally, I mean, when you say that makes a lot of sense to me. I think so.
Yeah. No, cause I'm trying to flesh out the consume, like the link between those two, because like that could be one of those cases where FI is still going to consume it, even if it's sensory bad, right?
Yeah, for sure. And I think maybe this is not necessarily related, but I think that there's like I can also trick my FI to do things that it doesn't want to do. But it took me a while to learn that skill. And you can, and I think perhaps it helps to have double masculine sleep, but like, let's say that there's something that I need to learn because I do research for a living, right? So sometimes I'll need to research topics that are not in my FI box or in my NI box or whatever. And the way that I go about doing that and like absorbing that information and integrating it into my FI anyway is to link it through NI, right? So I'll be like, okay, so you don't like this particular NI category and you're not interested in this particular thing, but it kind of is adjacent to this other NI box that you've consumed in, that you know something about. So you have a little bit of known information on this topic that is somehow related to this new NI category. And then that makes it easier to consume it. So I'm using NI to like bypass the FI. I don't know, can you do that?
No, and it's a very interesting mechanic that you've sort of fleshed out there. So it's a little bit of a mechanic on how you could use your sleep to overcome your consume, I guess.
Yeah, I think so. Like just making it more important.
Right.
because
making it NF important so that the SF can now consume it.
exactly, yeah. And I think that's the thing about like SF consume is like everything that you've consumed throughout your life is part of your identity, right? So whatever you've consumed, like even these freaking orchids that I mentioned, you know, I'll still be like, yeah, this is still my interest. This is still part of who I am, right? And what I've been throughout my life,
Interesting.
which updates all the time. But if I can use that like FI attachment or that identity and just hook something new into it through NI, then yeah, it kind of works.
So you do feel like orchids are a part of your identity now then?
So ridiculous, but like if someone brings up the topic of orchids, I'll be like, oh yeah, I'm so excited, you know. And it needs to be this particular, you know, quite narrow NI category of Nordic orchids, which is where I've consumed, right? And then I'll get super enthusiastic and I'll remember kind of the memories attached to it. So of course, and that's also being like a consume identity, right? It's always updating, but somehow it's stored.
Interesting. I don't even know if it's a thing, but if there are like, is there such a thing as like South American orchids? And you could sort of like, you're like, I don't like them, but because I like the Nordic orchids, maybe I'll consume them a little bit.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, absolutely. Right. Yeah. And I'll do this throughout my job as a researcher. Sometimes if I write reports, which is, you know, my FI thinks that's the most boring type of work, to be honest. Like just sitting and reading articles, it's like, you know, that's not the funnest thing. But I can trick my brain into thinking that it's consuming for self. This sounds very self-absorbed, and I think if you're aware of it, you can kind of
because you're hacking yourself.
You're hacking, you're just hacking your brain. And I've always been aware of that, probably because I'll overshare with the internet again, but like I didn't do super well in school, not because I wasn't able to take in information, but because I hadn't learned to hack my brain yet. And sitting down and consuming information can be incredibly taxing for someone who is double activated SE. Like you're more inclined to be moving around, gathering data, and to be mobile rather than in one like SI stationary location. So kind of bypassing that behavior has been, I've had to learn how to do it in order to kind of just hack my life, if that makes sense.
So like that's the method you've sort of figured out to hack your consume, to read reports, is do it in different locations?
Yeah, I have to switch up my location all the time.
And it works?
It works. So this is also like if my brain, because my brain wants to do the SE gather, right? So like my plan right now is to hopefully like live in a van, right? Do the whole van like thing. It's not as if I'm the first, you know, pioneer doing it, but if I can do that, then my brain relaxes because it's doing the SE consume. So I'm moving around in sensory.
It's like the most free place to live in a van. You could go anywhere.
You can go anywhere.
You probably won't end up going anywhere, but the fact that you can go somewhere.
Yeah, right. The important part. So you can wake up in whatever place you want, and it satisfies the part of my brain that is looking for new at all times, right? Yeah. So I'm shutting it down and shutting down the looking for new without getting depressed, because I do think that that's kind of a consequence of not getting new. That is by far the biggest challenge of my life. Yeah, I mean, SE lead is, I don't feel made for modern society in many ways, because it is so incredibly, it's so channel changing. And in one way or another, I've always been aware of that. For some reason, when I was younger, I was in schools, and I was lucky, I think. I was in schools that kind of gave freedom to its students. So I was able to SE consume and did fairly well up until a certain point where the SE style consume like stopped and the any style consume commenced, which is where I kind of started failing.
Okay, so you noticed that there was like an any style consume that you weren't able to do. That was kind of where the difficulty was.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Consuming concepts that are already distilled
Right.
is a problem to my brain, because I will want to understand through SE consume
Through the
how
SE,
they
yeah.
arrived, how they arrived at the conclusion. Then there are facts that I can consume without any difficulty, right?
Yeah, it reminds me of like a zip file where like you need to unzip
Right.
it to be able to access it. So it's like you need all
Right.
of the S. Let's open it up, get the SE, and then I'll make my own NI. I'm not going to just take this. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And always, like whatever it is that I'm studying, I always arrive at my own NI conclusion. But
Right.
I also studied later on at university. I studied mechanical engineering for a while, and it works fine. But that's a really good example of any style consume. I think parts of it are kind of like SE consume, in that you can consume ways that reality works, and you can compare it to current reality and say, yes, this is still how it works. This is like a timeless piece of SI. But any style consume and then taking that and building SI is where my brain kind of started failing. So what I ended up doing, because I was studying mechanical engineering with like a focus on design and product development, I ended up being more fascinated with the design process of it all, which is very much like a gamma quadra consume to blast kind of process, where you go out, you kind of map whatever's out there currently, and then you go out and you talk to people to find out how this product or whatever it is that you're designing is going to fit into someone's life and how they're going to use it. And so there, it's very research heavy, and then that's when the concept is created based on like real needs in current reality. So that's kind of when I started this other vocational school that I mentioned, just because I noticed that it wasn't a style of consume that I could do any to SI. And I think I always wanted to be that person, because I think I've been surrounded by a lot of any SI. Yeah. So I'd always looked at it and I was like, I want to be able to do that, but I can't, like, I can't invert my brain.
See, that's interesting, because I want to kind of disagree with you, but at the same time, I don't. Because I also studied engineering, right? And all of that stuff was just second nature to me. It all made sense. But I wonder if that's because I'm doing the double observing, and like the NE to SI problem is less of a problem because of the double observing.
I think it also helps to have TI if you're studying engineering, because there's now I'll just start ranting here, but like the part of being DI as my type is that I'm hyper dependent on the tribe, right? For TE. Always. Like if I'm to logic something out, I need other people, but I'm also DI, so asking for it. And there's still like a barrier to going and bonking on people's heads, especially when I was younger. Now less so, I think. Now I've bonked on a lot of people's heads. But when I was that age, it was like, please help me logic something out, was just not something.
So you had like study partners or something growing up?
Yeah, study partners, and I guess that's how I've figured out that my brain works, is that I need someone to really abuse. And it doesn't, the funny thing is, it doesn't matter if they're actually responding to me or not. Like, I just need to extrovert the TE in order to reach NI. Like, that's the ultimate barrier. And because at a certain point in my life, TE was still like a blind spot, right? It was like a hobby function. I was still quite argumentative as a kid, but understanding that it's not bad. Yeah.
I feel like TE is argumentative to learn, not to, you know what I mean?
Yes.
Especially if it's like a demon TE like that. It's like, you're not trying to argue and prove the other person wrong and be like, yes, I'm smarter than you. It's more like, I'm arguing to make sure that I understand this stuff.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Yes. And it's actually true. Like, that is something that I'll bump into with especially TI saviors, and there's nothing wrong with it, of course. It's more that like TE is always like going around in the world and looking for the yes and, right? Yes, and we can do this. It's like adding stuff to this, communal whatever thought process that you have going on. Whereas TI can be quite like, it doesn't always do it. Like obviously it depends on if you're aligning with someone's TI, but it can be more of like a shutdown, like no but kind of scenario. And sometimes for good reason, right? I do think that at times, when TE comes out, it's not even processed to the point where maybe it should be extroverted, right? Like there should be some kind of introversion prior to the TE coming out. So then perhaps there is a reason for it being shut down. Yeah.
We'll pick this up again. I just want to pay attention to a bunch of comments. We've got a whole bunch of comments. So I want to go way back just so that we don't forget anyone. This fly on the wall had a good one that wasn't really related to anything, but I think it's a good question. Maybe we can try to answer. So are the tribal tidal waves your awareness that you are doing things only for you, or awareness that is how it's being perceived by others?
Tribal tidal waves, your awareness. What is this relating to? Sorry, but is it?
I didn't catch what it was relating to, but
is it
I don't
the
think
sleep?
I don't think tribe tidal waves is awareness, but I think it comes from your awareness of, like, if you don't have an awareness of the tribe, we were talking about this, then you'll get a tribe tidal wave because you're not aware of how you're coming off and you're not presenting yourself in a way that would be favorable.
Yeah. I guess that's true. I'm just trying to think. When do I have tribe tidal waves? I probably have them quite a bit. I would say that I'm quite nervous about how the tribe is perceiving me, and it is in many ways like a blind spot, right? So at times, am I too careful? I think I like swing between the careful and not careful enough a little bit, like when it comes to the double deciding, right?
Yeah. I mean,
am I answering the question? I'm not sure.
This is something also I've noticed with like savior functions. It's like we'll get a little bit too close to the edge of the cliff because we know we're not going to fall off the cliff.
Yeah.
Whereas like all the other people are looking at you doing that and they're just like, oh, you're getting too close. Like there's a guardrail. Don't step over the guardrail.
Yeah. And I think especially with FI, like it's and something that I've been processing since I like understood OP a little bit more is that like I'm processing in the moment is that FI is also the heatedness coming out. There is like I'm gonna be emotive when I say things, right? And whenever I TE, there's heat behind it because it's coming from an FI point of view. So I think that can at times be, it can be too much, right? Because you have double activated TE and I feel fairly comfortable using the function, but there's emotion behind it. And I think all TEs, no matter if it's savior or demon, can have that depending on how they are feeling. But if I'm passionate about something, and this was me when I was younger, I was learning how to use TE because I had FI opinions, right? But Crom said something really smart, and she's like, TE in its, like, especially feminine TE in its purest form, when it's unaffected by FI, is like a secretary. It doesn't have any. It's not personal, right? So when there's FI behind it, and you're using TE, then all of a sudden it's personal and you're pushy. Which is it's a bit much. Right, it's a bit much to.
Do you think maybe your FI is biasing the TE a little bit, like it's pushing on the TE, or it's your FI just shining through and pushing from the FI? Sorry.
And this is interesting because the older I get, the more I can detach the two in communication. I can acknowledge that I have a certain opinion and that it doesn't have to matter, right, for what we are currently discussing. So when I'm detached, I notice that I'm being matter of fact. Right. And to be matter of fact is the reason that I notice it is that to be matter of fact and to be impersonal when I talk to someone is negative according to my brain. It's a sin. Yeah. Whereas
it's a sin to be impersonal.
Yes. So T,
Oh,
yeah. Yes, because when I was younger, like I couldn't separate the two, but now I think I can. I think
right.
I can, especially at work. I can be
Yeah.
impersonal and I can be, and please take this the right way, but like T is more robotic, right? It's more
Yeah.
like here we are, we're just discussing the facts, or the ST or the NT of the situation, and no one is involved. There's no passion behind this statement.
So
So I
that's
can
really
tell
interesting.
when I do it. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's really interesting. Sorry to interject, but it's really interesting
Mhm.
what you say, because it's like, it seems because you're so responsible for your FI, you are
Mhm.
more able to detach your FI from your TE. Because you're saving your FI, you can actually be more authentically TE, but it's a
Yes,
quote unquote sin to do it.
it's a sin. It's not a
Right.
comfortable or
Whereas,
correct thing to do.
right. And then whereas on the TE side, they're less able to attach their FI from the TE, but
Hmm.
that's what they're always trying to do, but they're just not able to because they're not taking responsibility for the FI.
Yeah, and I think I keep referring in every interview that I do to Megan Kelly. I think that
Right.
she has at times you can see that she's heated, and that's when
Right.
she's FI and she's coming for you, and that's when she's really,
Yeah.
really uncomfortable. To be like, it's uncomfortable to be at the receiving end of Megan Kelly in those situations. But when she is
Right.
TE matter of fact, you can kind of tell that she's being more objective as well,
Right.
because she is just being more ST and
Yeah. Yeah.
detached from whatever it is that she's talking
Because she
about.
has her FI under control. She's done the work on her FI to be able to TE.
Yeah, and I think that it's actually something that we mentioned in the SF clubhouse that was the other week. I think Julie and I had like a back and forth on the fact that there is such a thing as polluted tea.
Yep.
It's
100%.
it's polluted by feelings, and I never understood what that was. But it's unconscious F that is being mixed into T.
Yeah.
And so the thinking and the reasoning is then not,
Yeah.
it's not pure T.
Well, I mean, the same thing happens with TI. Like, emotion does pollute the TI when we're not
Yeah.
aware of it.
Yeah.
And this is something that TomTom and what's his name? The other TomTom clone we're talking about
Yeah.
in that one class?
Yeah. David
Right.
Bayer. Yeah.
David Bear. Yeah. So they were talking about the same thing. I think it represents itself differently, but yeah, it's on the same level where it's like emotion is just there underneath the surface, and it'll pollute everything unless you take
Yeah.
responsibility for it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I
That's
think
really good.
that's the deciding axis, right? And controlling it. Um, it requires mindfulness of personal opinions and personal bias. Then there's obviously NI
Right.
bias that I have that I'm completely unconscious of. So that's
Right.
yeah.
So
Anyway.
we're talking about your van, gray likes that you're
Mhm.
planning and you're organizing so that you can have freedom, which is really good. It's building the sandbox first, right?
Yeah. The
Um,
tricky part about that is like the some like SF dreams that I have, they're still NF, right? They're still, it's like it's not reasonable, or it's not like realistic to dream about living in a van. Now it is, because more people
mhm.
are doing it. So
I
now it's
mean,
all of
I
a
think
sudden okay.
it's more realistic than a house at the moment. You'll save a lot of money. I mean,
Right.
yeah.
And I've moved 32 times in my life. So for me, it's like I already live in a freaking van.
Is that sensory accurate, or it's just a
It's sensory accurate, yeah.
32?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's not, I live in a crazy city, so
Right.
it's the housing crisis deluxe. But um yeah, but then
32?
the reason yeah, it's freaking crazy.
Like, you would have
But
moved like once a month at some point in your life as well?
yeah,
Once
yeah,
every
for
couple?
sure.
Okay. Right.
Yep, yep, I've done that. Yeah, I've done that. So it's just circumstances, lots of
Yeah.
various factors playing into why that is. But I yeah, it was also like an
Sounds like an
NF
SE
dream of
life.
mine.
Yeah.
Yeah, SC life. Yeah, and I could kind of deal with the chaos. So I was like, in the beginning, it was actually quite fun. You know, the older I got, I was like, I'm a bit tired now.
Right.
But the van life was an NF dream, so I wasn't allowed to do it because it was sitting in sleep, not in
Ah,
SF to consume. So
right.
I've had a little bit of trouble like bridging those two like introverted realms, if that makes sense.
Right.
Anyway.
So Ian says agrees with you. He's also SE. He's SEFE. After about 2 hours, I need to get up and go find another spot to do my work. This current spot is worn out.
Yeah, right. Yeah. It gets worn out. Yeah, and there was a time in my life when it was, Ian is saying 2 hours. I have trouble sitting down for 5 minutes if I'm not involved in conversation. It's been extreme at times in my life. I think I'm kind of finding methods to get around it, but shutting it off completely has been just terribly hard. Anyway.
I'm trying to see if there's anything else popping up here. You didn't talk long enough.
No, okay. I'll keep ranting. Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah, I'm a little bit hyperactive, I would say, even though I'm not like masculine sensory. Yeah. I definitely have like hyperactive tendencies and like channel changing going on. A lot.
Okay, so we started touching on like the TE, how TE is seeing TI a little bit, I guess. And you were kind of talking it out in the moment, and I was being a very bad play friend.
No, you're good. You're good.
so yeah, I do want to go into the TE a little bit more. So when you do TE, you're doing it in kind of like that robotic state more.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it never used to be like that, but that's kind of like a discovery.
It's a discovery for sure. The other day I was explaining to someone that like being F savior is that like reasons are only allowed to exist within the F frame, so for FI, whatever you find appropriate, I guess, SF appropriate. Yeah. So the reasons are only allowed to exist within that box, right? And or actually maybe I should start by like learning how to use FI, right? It also involves learning FE, right? And where the boundaries for FE appropriateness are. And being an FI is that like growing up, you're looking to your own values so much that you're rubbing up against like the FE of various situations and various like the FE opinions. You're trying to like expand them at times, sometimes consciously. And being contrarian, is that how you say it? Like being abrasive in the F realm. And once you've kind of explored, I can't say that I know it yet, but like once you've explored the FE, like controlling the F realm is like, what's FE appropriate. At a certain point in your life, you're going to come to a point where you're like, I've been abrasive to a point where I just need to get myself under control. And it doesn't friggin' matter what I feel about this thing unless I can argue for it, So the TE must kick in at a certain point.
Yeah, I can see the twisting there because like, okay, so you were talking about the no but with the TI, right? So you're doing kind of like a no but with the FI?
Yes, exactly. So I used to do so more. I still do it. I'm not going to sit here and say that I don't do it, but I can look back on my teenage self, especially, and perhaps up until like the age of 22, 23, I was not uncomfortable to disagree in the F realm. I was uncomfortable disagreeing in the T realm.
Like? Do you remember, do you have an example what an F disagreement is?
Just activism of various kinds, like just standing up for like, whatever, like social justice issues. And I knew like, especially in certain like family contexts that I was in, that I would have opinions that weren't appropriate for the situation.
I see,
and that made me even more motivated.
Right. It's like, this is like you've said the word opinions a few times, and I've run into this word in the past where it's like, I don't recognize that word. What does the opinion even mean? But like, so I've always associated it with FI in some way. But so like, it sounds like you get an opinion and then you TE sort of figure out how to argue that opinion.
Yes. And if you have double activated TE, you're going to do that in loops for a long time in your life, I think. I think he was probably an ESTP, my uncle, and we would have these like debates in the kitchen. He was probably also sleep last. It was really interesting. Like he taught me how to argue. So I always had like a TI opponent who had like deep logics that I had to argue against. And I do think that my uncle kind of helped me practice the TE of the situation. And he would call me an idealist, which is a very FI thing, right? It's like, it's having, ironically, I think a lot of FIs actually have the same FI values. So that's also something that confuses me. A lot of FIs actually agree with each other, right? Like they feel very strongly about certain like social justice issues, and so
that's the thing with FI. It's like the ones that do agree with each other are now friends. Like we now have the same, yeah. But there are FIs that will disagree with you. Like there's
yes, of course. Like and it's a personal thing. So FI, it seems like there's more of like an FI opinion spectrum than there is like a TI opinion spectrum, because hopefully logics is going to be the same. I mean, there should be some kind of more objective truth to TI than there is to FI.
I also want to try to understand what you mean exactly by idealist, because that word for me means something, right? And I feel like I'm also an idealist, but probably in a different way. So I want to sort of see, how do you see yourself? What does that word mean to you?
I mean, when I was younger, there were lots of like causes that I fought for. I mean, I guess it's still relevant and I still would be able to argue for it, but I'm just not as passionate about it. There was a lot of heat behind FI opinions when I was younger, such as like, I don't know, LGBTQ. Like, yeah, I could list like a bunch of stuff that I think just various like NI boxes to have, like to stand for and to preach for and to like advocate for. So that, and in certain contexts, not in all contexts, that would, back then, you know, that's 15 years ago, that would have been like that would have been seen as idealism, you know. Idealistically, this is what society would value, right? The FE should include this group. We should be fighting for this person over here, and there's usually some kind of underdog, you know. This is where it's interesting, because I do think that FI and TE are very much connected. So I'm not sure how much of it came from having like double activated TE or just being an extrovert. You know, I'm not sure how in control I am over my own values, or what, you know, still is my values.
Well,
but
I mean, you decide your own values. That's the whole thing with DI. It's like, I decide.
Yeah.
No one's going to tell you what your values are.
But then depending on how extroverted you are, your values are going to be shaped by the reality that you live, right? So I'm still SE over FI. So I'm still out there gathering the sensory. So there's some kind of connection to what is currently going on. So SE will always trump my FI. What is real, you know, and what am I currently seeing? And then the FI is shaped by that. So SE is always king.
So, okay. So like, it sounds like your understanding of idealism is what is ideal for now? Like, what is the best?
Sure. Yeah.
What do we need to do now? Yeah.
And I think
what's the best
SE,
ideology for the moment?
Yes. And I do think that, like, I guess we'll get to that later, but that's kind of how I started like diving deeper into like the definitions for the animals, right? And I was like, SEFI is definitely like, it's like a disruptor of culture in many ways. It is saying, I can see that this is what culture is currently valuing, but I'm gonna value something different, or I'm gonna value something that I like. Let's look over here because this group is underserved. Let's fight for their, you know, whatever, you know, let's fight for their cause or whatever it is. And I do see a lot of
the tribe. Yeah.
Yes.
I can already hear the tribe saying, this sounds like FE, what you're talking about. So how is this not FE? Yeah.
And everyone asks me that, how is this not FE? And I think I do. This is the confusing thing. I think I have a few friends in my life outside of OP that should be FE saviors. And we're saying and talking about the same thing. My observation is that many of them arrived at the opinion later on. So I do think that the FI is like acting abrasively. It's being some kind of, I don't know. It's opposing the FE, because otherwise there would be no point to the FI. There's a strong FI expression when it goes against the FE, and then it tries to get people on its side using TE, which in many cases it does. So it forms an alliance, and then all of a sudden the FE is updated. So the FE norm is expanded to include this new, group of people, because more people are actually valuing this new thing. So that's where
so
SF
it sounds like you're pushing on the FE with TE a little bit.
Yes, you're like using TE. Yeah, exactly. To
you're
push on the boundaries.
To use TE to push on FE.
Yes. And then the FE kind of follows a little bit. So there's and then there's the part of the SE that is then acting and opposing the SI, because we have laws to tell us what we should value, right? This is what we value. You're not allowed to value something else. And then you're pushing against the SI as well.
Yeah.
And
a lot of laws are just very arbitrary. And I just want to kill the law.
Really... This is SE. It's like, what the fuck are we doing, right? But so SF Blast is like the last thing. This is the
best procedure we could come up with. Like, why are we not updating this?
Yes, I know. This is SE. It's like, look at what's happening, It's like, don't you see what we should be doing? And TE is obviously doing something slightly different, but I think very often, like SETE and SETI, we're kind of looking at the same spectrum-ish, Whatever tools that the TIs are inventing, the ST consumes, the ST plays are quite quickly gathering those.
So I'm thinking as well, like, could that definition hold true for the TI? Would the TI be pushing on the TE? And I think that's what TI does.
Yes, of course.
Does it have to use FE to do that? That's interesting as well. Because
perhaps sometimes we need to be shamed.
Right.
The FI needs the TFI axis needs some shame to like really understand things at times. But I do think so. But there's with TE is quite an open function, right? So whatever you feed it, it's not gonna it's saying yes and, like I said before. So whatever TI introduces, the only time I guess TE kind of opposes TI directly, it's like when you can see that there's ego behind the TI, perhaps when it's polluted by something else. Well, then it's like maybe you go back and you think about this some more.
There's also like the stacking thing a little bit, whereas like TE might compare like 100 arguments, take the best one and use that. TI is going to take one argument, build and work on it to perfection, and then present that. And it's like both of them are strong arguments, but it's like if the TE argument is defeated, then you're like, okay, we'll just take another one. And TI doesn't do that. TI can't do that. Like, oh, you defeated my argument. I've got to update it and fix it. I'm not going to throw it out and take another one.
And I see that happening in like arguments that I've had with people who are most likely TI saviors, is that they'll have like an argument. And then my job is to present all the TE perspective that I've gathered from my ST play. It's like, but this, and I'll present it as if it's mine, right? I'm not gonna, because I'm still DI, so I'm not saying, oh, but Johnny over here is saying this, I'm still presenting it. And it's mostly an unconscious process of like integrating reasons into your TE, cluster that you have going on, and then being able to throw those out and just kind of surrounding the TI to prove them wrong. It's terrible, but it's I do think that that's kind of what's happening.
I do feel that as well, when like TE just completely surrounds you and you've got so many arguments that you need that just make no sense, and you're about to argue against one, but then you got another one coming. It's like
Yeah. And you need to strategize, because you need to be able to connect them through NT Blast. And that's where NT Blast is a little bit tricky to deal with. To deal with it as a demon animal, it's like, I'm not even using my own arguments, but I'm using this animal to align the tribe around a common vision. And the arguments that I use, they need to be connected so that it makes sense for the other person. It's like, it's a beast to conquer, but
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that sounds difficult from the SF side. It's the opposite functions. Yeah.
takes a while. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's move on to NI because we're sort of running low on time, and I want to get to your theory stuff.
Sure. Yeah.
So Catherine has a good segue here. Emily has a good segue here. Can you describe in NI guesses which subgroups in the community likely have the littest chats?
I think littest. Could it be the ENTPs? Lit? Yeah, the most lit. That's
okay.
Could it be the ENTPs? Yeah. I really want to get into the ENTP chat. Guys, send me an invite.
Okay, so what's your NI? What's your NI about the masculine NI? You said it. It's always in the background. It's always sort of on. You just have to get there before you're allowed to present it.
Yeah, being lead SE and having masculine NI, obviously I'm not always intuitive, especially not when it comes to the demon sleep stuff, which would then relate to myself, like my relationship with other people. I would say that I'm quite like gullible, not understanding what's going on with me in relation to the tribe, because it's still a blind spot, right? But when it comes to like the NI of information, I notice it in my job, like I'm quite comfortable making hypotheses, and especially the older that I get and the more I've done it, it's like the guess is usually very much the same because all sensory leads to the same NI conclusion. But so I'm quite like comfortable using it in my job. But the thing is, in my job, I know that I'm also going to have the process of being able to go out there and prove it, or disprove it for that matter. So I always have the safety of SE. So in life, the way that like Savior SE expresses itself is that I'm not, like demon NF sleep is like, I can't trust my own emotional experience, which is odd for a feeling Savior. Ikram, again, I'll refer to her. She says a lot of wise things, but she said that you have to trust that your experience of what happened is as important as what actually happened. So that kind of summarizes what it's like to be double activated ST.
Yeah. So you don't you see that your feelings are subjective and you don't want to make decisions based off of them in some way?
Yeah, and this is where I thought this is why I thought I was an ESTJ, right? So I am a savior feeler because I have values, but I'm also not allowed to lean on them, right? Which is odd. So there's like a duality to it, and I've been trying to break it down. I think I made a few posts about it, but like that there's a part of FI and a part of NI that sits in sleep that I cannot access. So that's my emotional experience, but that is not good enough of an argument. Yeah.
So demon FIs, I see their FI is much more present and it controls them a lot more because it is so real to them. Demons are real, right? And because I'm thinking because it's a savior to you, you're just comfortable going against it and you see that it's yours and it's your perspective. Like there's no weirdness around it.
Yeah. I think this is where it gets tricky, because if I'm in a situation and I acknowledge that I don't like doing something, I will tell myself that it doesn't, or I'll say it in masculine FI to myself, that it doesn't fucking matter what you feel about this. We're going to do it anyway. Right. So there's like a really strong inner voice that's like, fuck you. We're doing it anyway.
Like FI though. It still sounds like an FI stack. So it sounds like you're using a higher FI to prioritize out your likes.
Yes, that makes exactly. Sense. Because I can understand that, and I don't know how I learned this. I think it's perhaps like childhood experiences or whatever. This is also demon NF talking. I can't use my story to like argue for why I've developed in a certain way, but I think I've been surrounded by a lot of FE in my life, and perhaps that helped, which is like, no one cares about how you feel about this. You're going to do it anyway. And I know that like by not going against my own will at times, I will mess things up for myself in the long run anyway, and for other people. So I'm not like, there are things in life that I'm not going to want to do, but it's like, it's not going to serve me in the long run, if that makes sense.
You'll kind of feminine TE go along with it.
Yeah. I think if I was to be like a DE type of my type, which is then Ikram for the third time, I'm going to reference Ikram. But
hi Ikram.
Hi Ikram. Hi. I think I said when we were talking the other day that I was like, if her type is just do it, my type is then just do it anyway, you know, because I can choose what I do with something, and I can tell myself that it's not necessarily it's not like a valid reason.
I wanted to flesh out that what you said, because you said, like, I know we're supposed to be talking about NI, but you said you know what you value, you know what you like, right? But I lost it. You'll yeah. Like, okay, your experience, you're invalidating your own feeling experience. You're saying it's not real. Your feelings are not real. Yeah. But they're real for you.
They are. Like I'll have a, oh fuck this, I don't want to do this, you know? I'll know that on the front end, but then I can tell myself that
it's not real. Well, like your feelings aren't real. Like let's say you're really upset.
I can throw it in the back, you know? I can throw it in the back for later, which is ultimately, I think sleep is great. Being sleep last is great for that. Just suppressing whatever in the moment that you're experiencing and saving it for later. You can mute things. You can put it on mute and deal with it later. And you can forget about it, to be honest. Like there are things that I just throw in the back and I'm like, okay, we're not doing this right now. You know, we're dealing with that later. And it's very unhealthy because to have like double masculine and sleep, the stacks that you build in the back.
It builds up and you need to do the processing at some point.
Exactly. And so that's also why I was guessing that I was TE savior. And even my type is complicated because having sleep last means that you're missing one part of your identity, which is like your timeless identity, right? And then you're missing your NI, your purpose. And so you can see the NI that belongs to the tribe, like the one in blast. Like whatever I consume, I have to share. I have to synthesize it so that it can benefit someone else. And that's why, like, I can see my future when I'm attached to a tribe, but I can't see it when I'm on my own. I don't know what my purpose is, but I know I can, all day long, I can find purpose for my clients at work.
Right.
So it's a very strange experience. And then whatever you throw in the back for later, it stacks up. So the tidal wave of NF sleep last is EJ like, you know, it's very like, I'm doing so much for everyone else because it doesn't make too much sense to me, to be honest, but I'm still DI, right? But I'm my ultimate demon is only present when I'm around other people. So I can't detach. It's strange.
Wow. Yeah, I'm gonna have to process that myself.
Yeah, yeah.
Really awesome. Thank you for sharing. That's really awesome.
Yeah, you have the same animal stack, eh?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's
okay. So let's touch on what you're working on. How can people? So I guess there's I'll put a link to Rose's video. I guess you had a good talk about your stuff there.
Yeah. I had to talk to Rose.
About it quick here?
Yeah. Let's talk about it quickly. Just caveating that I'm very sorry, Rose, if you're seeing this. I think I didn't do very good of a job explaining it on her channel. And my plan is that I'll probably put out a video and like a post on Medium, I think, about like synthesizing everything that I'm currently going through. There's still lots of missing pieces. There's a little bit of SFing.
What's the overview?
Of the information.
Just for everyone to get it. What's the general overview of what you're doing?
The overview is I want to look at OP types through like the sociological role that they play in the tribe. I think Dave and Shan are currently doing so. They've mentioned that like ST play is like, we see all the tools, you know, like they have little kind of nuggets associated with the different animals. But what I've been trying to do, and that I'm still trying to do, gathering information on, is just more how I can synthesize every single animal and understand the interplay between the different types of SF and the different types of ST and the different types of NF and yeah.
Okay, so you used a lot of words there. So what do you mean by synthesize? Like, so your goal is to synthesize all of the animals. What does that mean?
It means I want to understand the sociological role that they play in the tribe. So like ST play is tracking tools, you know,
Okay, yeah.
and SF play is tracking culture. And the reason that I did this was that, you know, as an NF sleep last, you're constantly trying to understand what your purpose and your place in the tribe is, right? I've never really had that in my life. So I needed to kind of do this in order to understand what my own purpose is.
That's really weird. Yeah, that's really interesting. That sounds very EJ like you said. It's like you want to see where you fit into the tribe to find your purpose. Where it's like the DI side is like, no, I mean, I want to find my purpose and then come to the tribe and force myself into them. Like, I'm this puzzle piece. I'm not going to let them shape me. They've got to shape around me. Yeah.
So
it's yeah.
It's very strange, but like not seeing your own life purpose and the role that you're meant to play in other people's lives is crazy. So I started with understanding what it is that I do every day, which is consume, play, blast, right? And kind of studying officially typed people, you know, without their consent, interacting with a lot of people in the groups, ultimately kind of seeing the role that they're playing, and translating that to, you know, what if we were living in a tribe of 512 people, let's say, or even less than that or more than that, out on the plains somewhere, I don't know, 13,000 years ago, then what would the person's purpose in the tribe be, right?
Yeah.
So understanding who I would be in that tribe has helped me a lot.
So who are you in that tribe then? So who would you be in a tribe of 150 people thousands of years ago?
Yeah, and so what I've come to realize is that, you know, I've just been looking at my life, looking at SF consume, and, you know, ultimately the lead SEs are living in like the periphery of the village, right? We're running outside of the village border to gather new things to update the perception of current reality, right?
Yeah.
So I've done that my whole life. I do that in my work. I travel to like distant countries, distant cultures to understand how other people are doing things, and how other people are doing things that's ST play. Like, what are you doing over here? And my whole life, without me being able to control it, I mentioned like flowers before. That's another type of SF consume. But my main interest throughout my entire life has been studying geography and like people and places and how people live in other countries. That's I haven't had any control of that, you know?
That's really interesting. Like a few times I'm seeing this pattern with you where it's like you are kind of wanting to be a niche expert in certain fields and certain things. Like you don't want to be good at all flowers or all orchids, but a specific orchid kind, right?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And so
specialist, you're a specialist.
I'm a specialist at being a generalist. You know, that's kind of and so where do I start this? You know, now I need to blast, but organizing my thoughts in the moment, bear with me. But the whole idea kind of started when I was like, okay, so if we are cognitively weighted, like in an imbalanced way, like, and we suffer from this imbalance that we have like an addiction to 2 functions out of 4, and we can only see 1/4 or whatever of reality. That means that no matter how hard we try or how, you know, IT or whatever we are, we're always going to depend on other people to survive, right? So we're codependent by design. There's no escaping that as a pack animal. So in that assumption, and comparing us to like solitary species that are probably more evenly weighted to not suffer as they walk alone on, you know, the ice caps of, you know, Greenland, who knows, like in comparison to them, we are gonna suffer because of our imbalance, and that suffering is going to attach us to other people to help us with our demons, right?
Yeah.
So we can't survive, no matter who we are, without the presence of tribe members. So that also means that we're born into, we can kind of, I think studying OP and assuming that it's real, we can kind of safely assume that we're also born with a cognitive makeup that forces us to play a certain role and that forces us into certain interests and niches. So there's not like a whole lot of free choice involved, like you're still a person, you're still living your life and designing it, but the role that you're playing and the niche that you're in, the NI niche that you're in, is not like, it's not in your actual control. So
it sounds like as well the idealism that you have fits into that, where it's like,
yes,
it's like, okay, there's an injustice here in the here and now, and we need to fight for this change in the here, like this very specific change here that's really important.
Sure. Yeah. Right. So everything is like, it's hard to, like with my type, just tying it back to that, like with feminine SE and masculine NI, there are like, I'm gathering in order to form like broad or not very broad, to be honest, like NI niches, right? And NI categories. And I was then trying to cluster like what ST play plus NT blast is trying to do. And I have both of them, right?
Right.
And it's trying to always organize the troops. So like if you have TE and especially ST play, you're always going to be able to kind of understand what other people are good at on the sensory spectrum. So you're tracking the tribe skill set, right? So your role in the tribe is that of a commander. Like you are gonna want to steer people, guide them towards a common NI vision, and I do see myself doing that in my job at all times.
I just pulled up an old comment from Savannah. It seemed like she's agreeing with you. I'm masculine TE, and I'd much rather us all get along and be on the same page.
Yeah, right. Because and that's and that is the role of TE, right? TE is, for that reason, I guess it's like, it is a fair function because it's not looking to sabotage or to like, it's looking for everyone to align. And I can feel that in myself, even as like a TE demon. I want everyone to align, and I want us to move towards a common vision. And I think you see that in everyone that like is a TE user, but especially gamma quadra people, which, according to Dave, is like OG quadra.
Maybe I'm wrong, but it sounds based on your wording there that like the common vision, you're using TE to get to the NI, to get to the common vision. It's like, if we can all agree on something, now we have a common vision.
Right. But it can, obviously I do think that NI comes from getting and harnessing TE through ST play. I think it builds always. Like I see it in my job, all of a sudden I have NI and I'm like, okay, guys, this is the direction we need to go in. And then I go full on NT blast on people. So for NT blast saviors is going to be different, I think.
But like what you were saying earlier about how it's because the sleep is last, all of your NI is to get to that, like that ideal direction, and you're not making it up. You're not like figuring it out on your own. You're consenting with the tribe to get there.
Yes, of course. Yeah. So I need the tribe in order to get to NI. But then I've been trying to decipher over the past month if the NI that I see for the tribe is the same as my NI. And I've kind of concluded that it almost is, I don't think that there's so much to my own NI that isn't in the NI that I'm seeing for the tribe. So I think if you look, I even had a call with Shan about this, but like you look at people that are NF sleep last, like Goggins, like friggin' even, Greg Plitt, he's my type twin, and then Jim Carrey, they're all kind of doing the same thing, which is aligning the tribe in a certain specific direction. And they are preaching NF stuff, in like an alpha state or whatever, but their own NI, their own purpose is to help the tribe find their purpose, if that makes sense. So it's the same. Yeah.
Cool. Do you want to pull up your graphic quick so we can show it to people?
Sure.
And then
let's
show them what they should expect on your up and coming YouTube video explaining it?
Yes.
Right.
Yes. I'm trying to share a screen here. Entire screen. Chrome tab. Okay. Let's do. Okay, let's do this. Okay. Yeah, so this is what I spoke about. Is it updating? Can you see this?
Yeah, I can see it. I made my screen big. Yeah.
Okay. So this is what I mentioned before, like the sociological roles. This is still
I do that too,
updating.
by the way. I give the tags where it's like nomads, settlers. It's just like placeholder
Yeah.
names.
Yeah. Placeholder names. But I do think maybe let's just break down some of like the headlines. I call it sociological roles because I think Dave and Shan, as great as it is, there's a lot of focus on like the individual types and how they can improve their lives, which I think is really like aligned with where we're currently at in society, which is like a more individualized society, which is probably why we have more anxiety, to be honest, because we're having to deal with our demons on our own, and we don't have like the tribe to cover our. Yeah,
I definitely agree. It's like a lot of people don't know where they fit in with the tribe, and therefore they go into depression because they have a lot to offer. They have things they want to give, and they're like, now you get to go and do this job that nobody values. It's like there's no.
There's no direction, and like this is why I'm so interested in it, because this is like one of apparently my own NI that I discovered over the past like 2 months, but like helping people find this abstract NI space that they should be acting in, right?
Place,
and living in their place in the
place.
tribe. Yeah, and that's kind of the Gamma Quadra like responsibility. We are in many ways like tracking the skill set of the tribe and like wanting people to find their NI purpose in the tribe, because that's what drives us. I have it here, like refines beliefs. So refines and analyzes personal beliefs and purpose, feelings and taste. And I think purpose is something that definitely is like the core of NF sleep, right? At least for me, that I have it last. So like my whole life, I've just been fumbling in the darkness to find my own purpose in life, not being able to kind of touch it or identify it, because it's like, it's too subconscious. So
so NF last for me is that I get aligning beliefs. It's like aligning ideals. I get that.
Yeah. So the whole thing started with me trying to understand what Gamma Quadra are doing, and kind of accepting also Dave's NI of it being kind of the original Quadra. I'm not sure if I think that's completely true, but like working with that as a hypothesis, I think it kind of works. I do think that Gammas see the tribe in a very different way than many other Quadras do. The ST play tracking tools, so like it's not on here, but tracking competence on a spectrum, like being able to steer and guide people to what their purpose in the tribe is. It's Gamma Quadras in that way, very much like the overview Quadra for efficiency, if that makes sense.
I was saying this to someone else earlier today, where it's like, SE isn't necessarily good at sports, but it will at least know how bad it is at sports, because it's tracking the spectrum, right?
Yes. So there's always a tracking mechanism going on autopilot or in the daemon background of any SE user. So there's definitely like an awareness of the sensory spectrum, and Beta Quadra is actually, let me restart. Like I like this idea of every quadra kind of being defined by their consume in many ways. So like Gamma Quadra, like disrupting culture, like I talked about earlier. And then you have Beta Quadra, which is a very ST Quadra, and it's disrupting the tools and like the skill set of the tribe. It's reinventing the ways we are currently doing things. I'm not sure if you relate to that as an ST consume savior.
So when I process this, now I'm not sure that I still agree with my old processing, but I saw that betas are the ones that are disrupting culture more. For example, like Hitler.
Really?
Hitler is a beta, or Martin Luther King is a beta.
Hitler is Alpha Quadra. I happen to know. Yeah. I think so.
I think he's an NFJ.
I think he's officially typed. Actually, I have some. Interesting. I have some EP info.
Okay, cool.
that he's Alpha Quadra. But
okay.
Yeah. So,
but like Martin Luther King Jr., for example, is also beta.
Yeah. Okay.
And like,
yeah, that.
I feel like betas are disrupting, I don't know about culture, but social progress in some way.
Okay, sure. Yeah, I mean, I guess that could be true with, especially with NF Blast,
I think
aligning
that's what
beliefs.
it is. It's the blast,
Yeah.
And so like the NT blast is probably what you're producing is the blast. It's what you're outputting.
Yes, exactly. Yeah,
What you're
yeah.
changing. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, yeah, exactly. I do think that the SF consume is consuming sensory information that it likes, but the output, like you say, is NT blast. So it is disrupting direction, I would say, disrupting the like the thought process and the direction of the tribe, if that makes sense. And then
I do
NF
agree.
blast.
I do agree that consume is like accepting or rejecting, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So consume is doing the accepting or rejecting, and then blast is doing the changing.
Exactly.
Yeah, based on that acceptance or rejection.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And then I call them nomads simply because of Dave's and I, then, the original SE and I being the original observer axis, which I think makes sense. I obviously don't have any sensory proof for this, but it would make sense that SE is then less dependent on SI, a specific SI location to like settle in. Whereas when we then settled, 13,000 years ago, we were in greater need, and SI and E would have been favored, right, to build society. And I see SI as being like the village center and being society.
Yeah. I'm still stuck on, so what type is Hitler then? He's a channel changer, right?
He isn't.
He isn't. That's interesting.
No,
he's a blaster.
Yeah, he's a blaster. He's definitely a blaster. He's a double masculine blaster, double activated. Yeah. So that's his
Alpha
type.
Quadrant. Those alphas.
Yeah.
Submersive.
That's what I've heard. Cool. I don't know where I got that piece of information, but I do think it originates from Dave and Shan. So yeah.
But then I can see, obviously we can do a whole episode on this. I just wanted to sort of give an overview, and then because we're running out of time. But this is really awesome. This is impressive. Okay. Oh, you got more. Awesome.
I'll just show quickly. I just also tried to kind of map the outer and inner worlds and what we're responsible for, like gammas then being, I'll just use gammas as an example, like commanders and prophets, thinking about it like through kind of like a military hierarchy point of view, who fits in where, and how we organize our troops. This is very Gamma Quadra thinking, but, and then this idea that I referred to before as like SI being the village center, and how information is being funneled into like being officiated kind of through an SI process. So SE being kind of the village periphery, where I'm running around collecting new sensory to funnel in through, various other people into official SI.
You know what? I think this process, there is this process. I think there are many processes out there that are like this, and I do see this process happen. This is definitely a process that happens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think it's hard to kind of see in today's society because we're living in a super colony ultimately, right? Like we're 7 billion people trying to make it work together. But if you just make the scale of it a little bit smaller and think about it from, what were we doing when we were a tribe and who was kind of responsible for what, then it's easier to understand the NI space that various types would be responsible for.
Thinking of it from like a lawmaker perspective, right? There's a bunch of people sitting in a room, not connected to reality, making laws that they think should influence reality and make it better, right?
Right.
And so then you're going to need to gather some SE to make sure that SI is correct, right?
Of course, yeah.
And so like this is how I see that process sort of happening or not happening, or as it should, right? It should be happening like this, right? Yeah.
It should be happening like this. I agree.
Right.
And I think
definitely SEs are all the ones that are punching against the law the most.
Yes, definitely. And I see this tendency in myself, especially when I was younger. So I was like, yeah, SE is always trying to break free from multiple boxes, because like SE is as far as you can be from the village center, which is SI. So you have two types of OI to get through to get to the village center, which is why you seem at times, you know, let's be honest, I can seem a little bit uncivilized, you know, in comparison to other people. And it is because, you know, at one point in time, there was a reason for that, you know. And I think interesting part is that you see this pattern occur in so many stories out there as well. Like I've been referring in the groups to like Disney protagonists, which are usually like, especially the princesses, but they're very often ESFP, right? And the whole hero's journey is like, when are you going to come back to the village center to share with us your wisdom that you have gathered out outside the village? And there's still that like that narrative going on. I think now perhaps like being a lead SE, you're gonna have to try a little bit more to like find your place in the SI narrative that's also going on in society.
So I can see that there is probably a lot of TI behind this, and I can see that you got to it through a different way, which is kind of how I see OPS, which is kind of cool. So
okay, that's interesting.
So I do see there's probably a lot of TI behind all this stuff. Really awesome. Yeah. So everybody look forward to Catherine's video and explaining this. And if you want to take a look at Rose's channel, right?
Yeah. I need some pressure, you know, so please harass me on Facebook in the DMs and tell me to do this thing so I can actually blast.
You just told all of YouTube to please harass you. Yes.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I don't
a little
mean
EP-ish of you. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't mean ST harassment, you know, just a little bit of light pushing. Yeah, okay.
Is there any final message you want to leave? Anything else you want to promote?
I don't know. When I get to it, please watch my channel.
Yes. Awesome.
I'll put a link when I do it. Yeah.
Yes, we'll put a link, definitely. Awesome. Very awesome, Catherine. Thank you so much for coming out, and have a good one, everybody.